Devil Eyes. Salutations, Dutch. My question: who do you consider the greatest tag team of your territory days, and why? There's quite the list to choose from, so I'd really like to know your personal pick. Thanks.
Well, in my earlier years, when I first started, I would pick two: the Assassins, which I thought were tremendous, and that was Jody Hamilton and Tom Ernesto. And people might remember Jody more than Tom, but they taught me timing, taught me story, and they weren't big, boastful guys. When they did their interviews, it was almost in a voice that you could say was deathly serious. They would never yell, they would never scream, and they would go out there and they just say what they were going to do, but then they'd go and do it. Of course, with a little bit of cheating, they would come out on top. I would pick the Assassins. A little bit later from them was, we were just talking about Gene Anderson. Mm-hmm. It was the Anderson brothers, Arn and Gene, and they worked a style similar to the Assassins. And they always worked the deal, the half ring deal. And that's where the announcers used to kind of connect. Their style was they kept their opponent in their half of the ring so he couldn't make a tag, which made absolutely a ton of sense. Because when he crossed that invisible line from the neutral corners to the other side, then he was getting close to a tag. And their strategy was to keep him as far away from from tagging his opponent as they could, because now the fresh guy's going to get in there. So I picked go ahead.
Can I correct you slightly? You said Gene and Arn. Do you mean Gene and Ole, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew?
Gene and Ole.
There you go.
It was Gene and Ole. And great. They drew tons and tons of money. Both teams in mid-Atlantic territory. Now, the Assassins were in mid-Atlantic, which in the business we used to call the Charlotte territory. It was the Carolinas, and it was Virginia and part of maybe Kentucky, maybe the edges of it. But they drew tons and tons of money. But the Assassins were there first. And this goes back years and years ago. Even before me, they were the Bolos. That was their name. So when they took up the Assassins, and a fan told me one time, he says, "Who are those Assassins?" Because it was a big deal not to tell who they were. And I looked around like this. I went, "Well, don't tell nobody, but those guys are wanted for murder in California." He went, I said, "Yeah, so don't let it out." Because I think they shot some mafia guy, and he was connected to the police, and that's why they put the mask on. Are you kidding me? I swear to God. And he believed it. It's a good story because he wanted to believe it. And I bet when he went home that night, he said, "Dad, you know those Assassins killed a couple of guys in California, and they had to go on the run. That's why they come here and put the mask." I bet people, shut the hell up. No, I swear, the Dutch guy told me. Okay, the next two I would say would probably be the Midnight Express. Mm-hmm. Because that Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton were working machines, literally machines. They didn't stop. They had that mouthpiece with Cornette, who could get an argument started with Mother Teresa, and they just had it all. Cornette run that mouth, and they do the work. And probably another team I would say would be the Rock and Roll Express. Because they drew, and again, we'll go back to the mid-Atlantic territory, and they drew a lot of money in Oklahoma territory. But the Midnight Express was put together, I think, in Tennessee, in Memphis. So was the Rock and Roll, or they may have had it in Texas. I'm not sure. But I think the Midnight, I know the Rock and Roll Express was put together in Memphis because me and Lawler was going up the road one day, going up the road. We could have been going anywhere. And he told me he had Robert and Ricky coming in and needed a name for, and we thought, and we thought, and we thought. And finally we stopped at, the regular stop, a convenience store, and we got gas or whatever. But, and I walked in and we was looking at all those rock and roll magazines. And I saw one, and I can't remember the name of the guy now, but I said, why don't we put all those leotards and stuff and put some handkerchiefs around their, I didn't know what they call them, scarves around their leggings and all. And he said, hey, we could do that and call them the Rock and Roll Express. So, and I've heard two stories on that. I thought me and Lawler come up with it, and then Jimmy Hart told me him and Lawler came up with it. So who knows who come up with it, but it worked for them. And if I hadn't told it here on this story before, the first night they were the Rock and Roll Express, Robert Gibson was embarrassed to put it on. Boy, Ricky wore his ass out. I did too. I said, oh, put the shit on. I said, they're not doing nothing with you as Robert Gibson. Put it on, get a different look. And it got over that night, and he never had trouble putting it on again. And he made a ton of money with that gimmick.
Two things. Oh, sorry.
Those four teams are probably, I can't think of any now that would even come, well, they come close to them, but it was a different gauge. So I'll pick those four teams as top tag teams I've ever seen.
With the Midnight Express, the team was formed in Southeast Championship Wrestling and consisted of Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose.
That was Atlanta.
And
I think that was Atlanta.
Let me have a look. Southeast Championship.
But it was just the name, the Midnight Express. But the movie had come out too. The Midnight Express, the movie. And I think that's where the name came from.
And the other thing is, when I was talking to Robert Gibson, I think this was off air, but I might as well just repeat the joke. As he said, he's just like, how do you think I make my dick 12 inches? And I was, go on, I fold it in half. Like, well done.
That sounds like Robert.